everyone. I couldn't find a book to read, and I need to search my house. I wanted to do a reading for ASMR, so I decided I would just tell a story. So I'm gonna tell a fairy tale story, and it's going to be about Cinderella. So this story starts out where Cinderella is a young girl, and she has a wonderful father, and they live in a beautiful castle, and her father goes off to work a lot, and so he goes off, and she has a nanny. Her mother has passed away, but she's a really good little girl, and she loves animals and is really kind to everyone, and her dad will bring her stuff back when he comes from his trips. So one day she finds out that her dad is going to remarry. I guess he missed not being married, and he wanted to find a mother for Cinderella. So she moves, they get married, she moves in, and she has two daughters, which are her stepsisters. And they all move in together in the castle, and the father, of course, has to leave on the trip, so he's not always there to watch what's going on. Well, it turns out that the stepmother is really jealous of Cinderella. She's growing up to be such a beautiful girl. Her father adores her, and she's just so kind and loving to everybody and to all the animals, and she does all her chores. But this makes the stepmother even more angry. So she kind of starts plotting against Cinderella, and she, doesn't treat her fairly. She doesn't treat her very nice. And one time when the father was gone on a trip, he got in an accident, and he got killed in the accident, which is really sad. And Cinderella was just beside herself. She was just so sad. And of course the stepmom inherited everything that was his, and I guess especially back then, being the wife, it just went to the wife. And so she just turned on Cinderella, because now she didn't have to worry about her telling her dad anything. So she turned Cinderella pretty much into a slave, and the stepsisters made her do all their work for them, so they didn't have to do anything. And they couldn't really afford, because they didn't have his income anymore, so they couldn't afford to have maids and butlers and everything, so they had Cinderella do everything. And she did it because she was just that kind of person. She was a good person, and she was really kind, and she tried to do what she thought was, right. And she would have her do all the laundry, clean the floors, everything you can imagine, cook the food. And she would be so tired when she'd go to bed. And she had the worst room in the house. The girls and the mom got the nice bedrooms, and she had to sleep in an attic. But she did make friends. She had friends. The birds would come to her window and sing, and she had friends with that. She took care of the chickens and the cows and the horses and everything that they had, and she was just a really, really good person. So one day they announced that there was going to be a ball at the great palace. The king was giving a ball. They were trying to find a wife for the prince, and of course Cinderella was dreaming, and she was really beautiful anyway. So but it wasn't just her beauty, it was the beauty from within. So it wasn't just that she was pretty on the outside. She was pretty on the inside. And the stepsisters weren't ugly, but they weren't like very nice people, and that showed. Even though they weren't really ugly, they weren't like marriage material. So anyway, she wanted to go to the ball, and of course the mom had already made arrangements for the stepsisters to go, and she had Cinderella help them get all their clothes and everything. And then Cinderella found an old dress, because the stepmother didn't give her anything nice. She found an old dress and she fixed it up. It was her mom's, and it looked pretty, but you know, it was not super fancy like her stepsisters, but it was okay. And when she went to show everybody that, you know, to show them she was getting ready to go, the stepsisters started tearing at the dress, taking the bows off and the sashes and everything, and they just ruined it. It got all like ugly and torn, and poor Cinderella started crying, and she ran to her room. And the mother and the girls went to the ball. Well, Cinderella went outside, and she was sitting and she was crying, and she was just feeling like, you know, nothing good was gonna happen, and you know, and things weren't gonna change, and she was just really, really sad. And all of a sudden she saw like a glowing light, and it spun round and round, and she was like, what is that? And all of a sudden a lady appeared, and she had a wand, and she told her she was her godmother. And Cinderella was like, what? You know, she didn't know that there was even such a thing, and she was her fairy godmother. So Cinderella kind of, you know, didn't know what to think, and then she started doing things with her wand, and she turned the pumpkin that was growing in the yard, she turned it into a coach, and then she turned the mice into horses, and then there was a dog in the yard, she turned him into the coachman. And then the best part, she made Cinderella a beautiful, well, it just kind of came on her, this fancy beautiful dress and a tiara and glass slippers. Can you imagine glass slippers? I don't know how you would wear those, but she was able to do it. And she told her, but make sure you're home by midnight, because the magic will end and everything's gonna turn back to the way it was. And she was like so happy, and she's like, oh, fairy godmother, I just don't know how to thank you, this is so wonderful. And fairy godmother's like, well, you better get going, you know, because it was getting late already. So they zoomed to the castle, and when Cinderella went in, everybody like turned their heads and were like, oh my god, who's that beautiful girl? And she went down the stairs, and the stepsisters and the mom saw her, but she didn't look like Cinderella really, because she was all fixed up and everything, and her hair was all done, and they knew that, you know, how would that happen? So they didn't know who she was, and they didn't really get a good look at her, but the prince did, and he started dancing with her, and they went out in the moonlight, and they danced a waltz, and it was like love at first sight, and which happens in real life, not just fairy tales. And they danced, and then she looked at the clock, and it was probably 2 minutes to midnight, and she was like, oh my gosh, I've got to go. And he was like, wait, I need to know your name, what's your name? And she just kept running, and she went down the stairs, and one of her glass slippers came off, and so she kept running, and he was trying to send the soldiers after her and everything, nobody could catch her, and she got in the coach, and then she was going down the road, she was almost home, and it turned midnight, and everything started turning and back. The coach went bleh, turned into a pumpkin, the horses turned into little mice, the dog came back, and poor Cinderella had her raggedy clothes on, And so she was kind of sad, but she was also happy because she got to see the prince, and she got to have a good time. And so you know, it was like a dream, kind of like a dream come true. So she went home, and she didn't tell the stepmother or the sisters about it. And time went by, and they found out that the prince was sending a man around with a glass slipper, and that he was going to try and find the woman that fit, the girl that fit the slipper. And he knew that once he found her, he would find his true love. So the man came to their house, and the stepmother locked her in a room. And she was crying and crying. She was like, oh, you know, she just felt terrible because she thought this was my chance to, you know, get to be with the prince. And the girls, the stepsisters, tried the shoes on, and they tried to make them fit, and they almost broke the slipper. And then one of the sisters put it on, and she squeezed her foot into it really hard, and it flew up in the air, and it smashed and it broke. And so it was, you know, really sad. And the stepmother probably thought, aha, you know, now he's never gonna find out. Even if he didn't get my daughters, you know, even if it didn't fit him, at least he won't find out about Cinderella. But while all this was going on, the little mice that used to go in her room pushed the key in to her so she was able to open her door. And she, at the last minute, right when the guy was getting ready to leave, she unlocked her door, and she ran down the stairs, and she said, wait, you haven't tried the slipper on me. And the man said, I thought that these were the only young women living here. And then she was like, no, I'll try it on. And then he's like, well, you know, it broke, the glass slipper broke. And she took the other glass slipper out of her pocket, her apron pocket. And she had saved it. The fairy godmother had, even though she had taken everything away, she had left the glass slippers for her to keep. So obviously she was the princess. So the stepmother was like, ah, and the girls were all mad. And he took her back to the castle, took Cinderella, and she married the prince. And I'm not sure what, maybe the stepmother got, like, maybe, I always think it would be cool if the stepmother had to be like her maid and the girls had to work at the castle. And Cinderella married the prince, and they both lived happily ever after. So I hope you enjoyed my fairy tale. I wasn't able to read it, but I told it. So have a good night or day or whenever you're listening to this, and enjoy your life, and remember that I love you. Bye-bye.